First of all, my name is Paul Dupre, and I'm the National Park Service Superintendent here in Essex County. I oversee the Salem Maritime National Historic Site and Saugus Ironworks National Historic Site. And I'm also the primary contact with the Essex National Heritage Area. This is a non-profit organization, Essex Heritage Commission, and I'm the primary liaison for the National Park Service for that. Have you all heard of the Essex National Heritage? Oh, wonderful. They're doing their job. Yeah. So, and it's just, one of the reasons the Heritage Area was established was because Essex County is chock full of National Historic Landmarks. And if you take a look at a map of Massachusetts, I don't know what you all are doing, but all of a sudden they're all here. Not a lot, but all of them are not here, but there's a lot of them in this part of the state, the Commonwealth. A couple of things about National Historic Landmarks. They started as this concept during the Great Depression, when the National Historic Sites Act was passed in 1935. And you can imagine not everybody had preserving history as their primary focus during the middle of dramatic economic times. So it is a testament to those folks who came before us that they set aside some of their time, some of Congress's time, to go through and evaluate what was necessary to preserve for the future what we have and what we hold dear. It took a while before the National Historic Sites Act ended up developing National Historic Landmarks program. That came about in the 1960s. And as a consequence of that, it was sort of this understanding that just because it's a National Historic Site doesn't necessarily mean that it should be managed by the National Park Service. In fact, there's a lot of National Historic Landmarks that are not managed by the National Park Service, and they're managed very well. In fact, it's one of the major successes of this kind of a program and this sort of legislation. But I will tell you, what I find, I'm going to diverge now from the prepared remarks. So Dennis, take care. I was looking at, okay, what are the National Historic Landmarks in Massachusetts? Or what's the list? And I'll tell you what, for those that are really connected to people, all right, not like to an individual, by and far, most of those are like the Pierce Nichols House, or the House of the Seven Gables, or the Gardner House. These are men. These are important white men. Now, there are a couple important white men here, so not casting any aspersions. But I will tell you, there are important white women and important women, and it doesn't matter what your race is, but there are lots of other people who are part of our history. And when we scratch a little bit, we find out these amazing stories about our history that we should then be preserving into the future. It pleases me to no end to find out that Lydia Pinkham is one of the folks who was being commemorated in this way, and kudos to Karen, you and Michael for taking the time and attention and care. You were talking to me just inside. Somebody else, or you, could have decided this would make a great triple-decker, or excuse me, I guess it's just two. But, how can we divide it up and add more rent here? That actually is pretty common. And this is why we have to pay attention to preservation issues, not just here in Lynn, but here in the context of a part of the country where there's a tremendous amount of history. And also thinking about the fact that there's this very successful woman in the late 19th century whose product and her life's effort had a tremendous impact on millions of other people across the decades. And I understand that even after she passed away, she was still responding to letters to her. So there's something about that you just have to commemorate. Now, my mother is here, and Jerry, just raise your hand, please. I asked her to come because, and I asked with Karen's blessing. My mother is a retired nurse practitioner, and worked the last 25, 30 years of her career on women's health issues. And from my perspective, when I think about Lydia Pinkham and what her career was about, at a time when, frankly, there really wasn't a whole lot. I mean, she was probably the only person who was doing this, right? To thinking about where women's health is now, it's a pretty amazing trajectory. And I have 4 older sisters, and I can tell you, when I was walking through and looking at the label downstairs on what the medicines are for, I can tell you that there were times when I was growing up when I was thinking this would have been helpful. But it also is interesting to me that this is coming from a time when snake oil was actually, snake oil salesman, less than helpful items were being shared as medicine, and to a public who were eager for help and whose healthcare decisions were considered democratic. You get the right to put whatever poison in you in order to make you healthy, right? I mean, that's kind of how it worked. Luckily, we have the Food and Drug Act, which was passed in 1906, and the Pinkham potion was part of the conversation as the act was passed. So I think that there's a lot of great that has been done by the occupants of this house, and it's fitting that we continue to commemorate it. I'd also like to just put a plug in there that preservation of our history is always sort of a question, that people ask, like, well, don't we already preserve all of the history that's already existed, right? And there's also comments that are made about making our history politically correct. So I will tell you that how you interpret history is solely up to you. It's an individual's choice. But you want to have a great variety of choices, don't you? And that variety is increased today, and with the people who will be walking down Western Avenue, admiring the garden and the house, they'll see that plaque and they'll want to learn a little bit more about this history that started here in Lynn. So anyway, thanks for letting me ramble on. I appreciate all of the work that you all have done, and I'd like to end it at that. So,
Thank you very much.